Thanks to a federal grant awarded to the Regional Office of Education, community agencies, including Crossing Healthcare, Decatur Family YMCA, the Salvation Army, and Webster Cantrell Youth Advocacy are partnering for a series called Keeping Our Kids Safe. I'm Brian Byers of NowDecatur.com. In this episode, I had an opportunity to sit down with Detective Richard Wistocki, founder of Be Sure Consulting, an organization that educates law enforcement on using cutting-edge investigative techniques to catch online predators. Detective Wistocki also educates parents and students on how to stay safe online. We're here with Detective Richard Wistocki, who travels the country speaking to students, parents, law enforcement officers. You have a 30-plus year career in law enforcement?
Yes.
How did you start out?
So I started out in the Village of Summit Police Department right outside Chicago. That's where I grew up.
Right.
And my godfather was the captain of police. My grandfather was a police officer. So in my childhood years, from the age of 12 to 32, I was a martial art instructor. So I ran 3 taekwondo schools in the Chicagoland area. So I was really in tune to teaching anybody. You know, I was a 3rd-degree black belt in taekwondo, so I really enjoyed teaching. And so I became a police officer. And when I was 21, I went to St. Joseph, St. Lawrence, and St. Xavier for college. I am a good old Catholic schoolboy.
Sick.
And so I wanted to become the police in my community. And then I got out of the academy, and I just got tired of arresting all my friends I grew up with. So we have a big Albanian population there, and one night, my fiance, who is my wife now, we were watching a movie at my house, and I heard this pop, 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 and they shot out all the windows of my car. So my fiance says, I'm out of here. I'm not living this life, because you had to live there. And I'm not living in this town. Forget it. I'm out. And so we cut off our engagement. For 6 months, I was searching around, trying to figure out. I tested for the FBI, State Police, Downers Grove, Marshals, and I took the first thing that came, which was Naperville. Thank God.
All right, you ended up serving a SWAT team, right? For a minute?
Yeah, so in Naperville, I spent 4.5 years in patrol. In 1995, I went into juvenile investigations, and I immersed myself in child death investigations to figure out why parents and paramours kill kids. And I was part of something called MPEAK, which involved many pediatric emergency room doctors, nurses, DCFS, and we studied child death. And so 1997 rolls around, and we had a 13-year-old who was talking to someone from Brentwood, Tennessee. He picked her up, drove all the way up to Naperville, picked her up the corner of her block, took her to a hotel, had raped her, and thank God I didn't kill her and let her go back home. And so she told her parents what happened, and when she told her parents what happened, they brought her to the police department, and she said he met her on this thing called, I don't know if you know what this is, America Online. So I talk to young police officers, they have no idea what America Online is.
You can't even prompt them with You've Got Mail, right? Yes. So this is what you do now. And you go and you train
Yes.
law enforcement officers. There's never been more access into kids' lives than
Correct.
what we have right now.
Correct.
And it's also, I feel like the government's so woefully behind, when it comes to enacting more laws. I know you've been involved a lot in Springfield on that
Sure.
regard. But let's just start with, what you're training officers, to look for. Do officers and police departments, I guess depending on the department, are they up to date on the technology? Command structure. Do they fully realize how kids are communicating?
Absolutely not.
All right, that was my feeling, but I didn't want to go there.
So about 5 years ago, I introduced a bill through Senator Connolly, where I wanted to have 8 hours of cyber report taking in the academies. And I made it through the Senate. I went to the House, and I got shot down. And they said that was something that should be in in-service training. Well, nobody's offering in-service training. And so when it comes to cyber stuff. So what happened was I said, you know what, I'm just going to do it myself. So I went to ILETSB, the Illinois Police Training and Standards Board, and I introduced a patrol response to internet crime, sexting, cyberbullying, and vaping investigations with appropriate consequences, and a 3-day class of delivering effective internet safety presentations to parents and children. And so all those got passed. And so I just started going throughout Illinois teaching these classes. And law enforcement became really amazed at the information that you can find. But on the other hand, when you have officers who are not trained in cyber, sometimes when a victimization is reported to the police department, they're like, oh, we don't handle that. Or they're like, look, lady, if you want me to take the sexting report, I'm going to arrest your daughter too, because she's the one who took the picture. You still want the report? And I joke in my law enforcement classes, and I say, you know, in law enforcement, you have patrol officers that work really, really hard, and not taking a report. And they all laugh. I'm not laughing. I'm laughing with them, but I know that that's a problem because they're not getting the training. So when they don't understand technology, our law enforcement thinks of an excuse why we cannot take that report. Here's a stat for you. The average internet predator in the United States can have up to 250 victims in their lifetime. That's how many kids they affect if law enforcement isn't part of it. Well, the reason why they're so successful is because law enforcement officers don't take the report. So I was in a city nearby here about 2.5 years ago. And I was talking to parents, and that was a Thursday night. So I went to dinner with the chief and the sheriff. And I leaned over to the chief. I said, Chief, who handles all your cyber stuff at your police department? He goes, I only have a couple detectives. One's full-time, one's part-time, and we just don't have the money or the training for that. I said, so what happens when a parent brings their kid in and they're victimized? He goes, I just call the state police or I send them to the FBI. I'm like, that's unfortunate. I said, here's my card. If you ever need anything, let me know. Monday morning, I'm heading out to train some law enforcement, some SROs. And the detective says, are you Detective Wistocki? And I said, yeah. How can I help you? He goes, well, my chief told me to give you a call. And I said, okay, what happened? He goes, well, I had two 12-year-olds on Snapchat. One of them thought it would be a good idea to talk the other one into committing suicide. And she did it. She's dead. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that. How can I help you? He goes, well, I need to get to the messages. I said, well, you saw the messages, right? I mean, you have the device. Do you have the device? Yeah, I got the device. But you look at the messages in Snapchat. And he goes, well, that's the problem. I said, what's the problem? He goes, the parents didn't know the code on how to get into the device. And therein lies the problem. So not only do I have to train law enforcement on what to ask for, I have to train parents on how to watch their kids on their social media and on their gaming platforms. It's a domino effect.
You can have all of the internet security you want, right? Through your cable device, through your whatever.
Still not.
But it's not going to keep human actors out of there.
Correct.
Particularly if young people are being fooled into letting them in.
Correct.
And there's a lot of bad actors. I mean, that's a big wall.
Yes.
And a lot of ways. I mean, you know, our parents didn't have to worry about information coming through the refrigerator.
Right.
So all of these connected devices, all of these kids living on tablets and phones and everything else. And then all of the apps. You mentioned Snapchat. You know, a grown-up can barely keep up with the number of messaging apps, you know, as teens go in and out of them, because they don't want to be where the adults are. You know, so they're an easy place to find victims.
Absolutely. So see, here's how kids get themselves in trouble. Here is the bottom line foundation. So when I teach 4th and 5th graders, like when I go out in this community and I'm teaching 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, you know, we're doing this in September, and I will ask the question to them, how many of you have a Snapchat? Yeah. How many guys got Instagram? Yeah. How many guys on Discord? Yeah. How many guys got TikTok? Yeah. So how old are 4th, 5th, and 6th graders? 9, 10, 11 years old, right? Well, did you know you have to be 13 in order to have that social network? You got to be 13. So what happens there? So why do they have it? Because they whine and they whine and they whine and they whine to their parents or their guardians. And they say, okay, fine. But you better not do anything wrong. So let's face it, our kids are not the best mathematicians. So they go in and they say, yes, I get to have a TikTok. I was born in 2012. Do I go up with my date of birth or I go down oh, heck with it. I'm just going to put in 2000. That'll get me in there. Then I asked the kids, how many of you put in the date of birth of 2000 because you didn't want to figure it out? 80% will raise their hands. How old are they today? 2000.
Oh, they're 23. Yeah.
So now I have a bunch of 9, 10, 11-year-olds posing as 22 and 23-year-olds. Who do you think is going to talk to them? Adults. Who do you think is going to send them naked pictures? Adults. Who do you think is going to ask them to manufacture those pictures? Adults, because they're 22 and 23. Now, when I train my SROs, I tell them, you don't have a case until you can see the chat and you can prove that that suspect knew that they were of that age, because they're all putting 22. And that's an affirmative defense.
It almost seems daunting for parents. I mean, we've never had a technology gap like we have today. I mean, my parents, my grandparents, their grandparents didn't have that much technology developed in all of their lifetimes. In the last 15 years, the world has completely changed.
Absolutely.
So an average 40, 50-year-old, what tools can you give them to keep up with the technology, to know where their kids are? What rules, what age should a kid, get a cell phone? And once they get that cell phone, when should they be allowed to be on social apps?
Yeah. One of the major things that I teach in my parents' class. So let's say I go to a school that has 1,500 kids. Well, there should be at least 1,000 parents there, right? But parents suffer from a deadly disease called the NMK syndrome. Not my kid. My kid would never do that. It's not that your kid wouldn't do that, it's the outside influences that would get to your kid when you allow that to happen unfettered. So here are the rules for my parents. When I start out talking to parents, I'm like, all right, I'm going to tell you something that you're not going to like, you may find offensive, but I'm not here to contribute to your feelings. I'm here to tell you what you need to be doing. So here it goes. If you want to leave after I say this, I get it, and I don't mean to offend you. I really don't care, because I already got paid. Anyways, it's a joke I put in there. So I say, all of you parents here tonight are responsible for your children. That's it. You see, you're not only responsible for their food, clothing, shelter, and education, you are responsible for their technology. I don't care if Nana, Nonu, Tia, Tiu, Grandma, Grandpa paid for that iPhone 13. They don't own it. You allow them to have it or not. It is a proven medical fact that the frontal cortex of their decision-making brain is not developed enough to handle what goes on social media, especially when you have a 9-year-old playing a 22-year-old, right? The second thing I tell them is that there is no such thing as privacy for children. You are responsible for your child. You are the one that lets them use that device. You are the one that has to go into that device and check. The third thing that I tell parents is that under no circumstances, when you allow your child to charge their devices in the rooms at night, that's when they get victimized. The common denominator, I've arrested over 300 internet predators in my career. The common denominator when it wasn't me playing the victim, when it is an actual victim, the common denominator is I had parents allowing them to charge their devices in the rooms at night. When you allow your child to charge their devices in the rooms at night, you're sleeping. They shut the door so you can't hear them. There's no need to talk. It's typing, reading, and performing. This is how our kids get sextorted, blackmailed, is when their devices are allowed in their rooms at night. So these things, I spend a lot of my time training parents in their mindset by taking this away and by monitoring. So then parents, I'll answer your question. When is a good time to get your kid a cell phone? Two things there. So my boys, I have a 27-year-old and a 22-year-old, okay? When they were growing up, my kids played soccer all over the world. They had great college scholarships. They were soccer maniacs. We went to Spain. We did all kinds of travel. But I need to know where they were. Since they were 9 years old, they've had a cell phone so I can track them. But what I tell parents is that if there's any parent here wanting to get their kid a cell phone, you're in that gray area, you don't know if you should or shouldn't, and I get a lot of parents raising their hands. I said, get them an Android. No matter what phone you have, parents, it doesn't matter. When you have an Android, it is real-time monitoring of that device. What does it monitor? It monitors all the social networks. It monitors and gives you alerts on self-harm, grooming, drug abuse, sexting, alcohol. It'll send you like that. If you get them an iPhone, like your old iPhone, Apple does not allow third-party monitoring of their devices. You have to do something called onboarding, and it tricks the phone. And when they come home, it tricks the phone into thinking your Wi-Fi at home is the cloud. But it's not latent. It doesn't get into all the social networks. If you have an Android, you can. Monitoring is so important for the kids. Just to know. So the last thing I say to parents is moms. Moms have a gift from God called the maternal instinct. It's been my experience that mothers are never wrong. This gift from God is to protect their babies. Whether their babies are 6 months old or 40, it'll never go away. Never. I tell parents, that moms, always trust your maternal instinct. Because if you think something's going on, you know where you're going to find it? In their cell phone. It's in there. This is who they are, this is their reputation, how they communicate. This is everything to them. So if moms have a feeling, your answer is in their social network.
Do you think this problem will only get worse? Because now, I feel like 5 years ago there was a debate about when do you buy a phone. Right. Now we hand 4-year-olds iPads. Because it's so intuitive, it's almost a babysitter. Right. So I don't see this changing. And
again, it goes with education of our parents. Drives me crazy when I go into a great restaurant and I see a mom and dad there with a 5 and a 6-year-old, headphones on, iPads. I can't even control myself without walking past that table and saying, looks like you're having great conversation with your children tonight. And I do it every time. I don't care. Because what one time do you have the ability to socialize your child into being appropriate with etiquette, making them order with that person with the waiter, respecting that waiter, looking that waiter in the eyes, and saying, I would like this, thank you very much. That is the only time. But when you have parents coming in with their kids, hey, if you want to shut them up, leave them home.
Statistically speaking, schools are still the safest place for kids.
This is true.
But we all know the increase in these massive shootings and school shootings. So many parents, I watched this in Texas most recently, and these parents still don't have answers. That's a law enforcement side of things. Yet every single one, if you dig a little deep, there were clues leading up to all of them. Very few of these things happen without some sort of online footprint. How do authorities do a better job of identifying that? How do families do a better job of identifying that? The clues are always there after the fact.
So I belong to something called an ICAC, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. There are 5,000 detectives like myself. What I saw with my own SROs at the Naperville PD, I saw that they never had training in what we did at the ICAC. So I wanted to bridge the gap. So I went to the National Association of School Resource Officers and says, hey, I'm an ICAC trainer in law enforcement technology. I would like to start training your organization so they're better prepared to handle social media. And this is what they deal with every day. They're dealing with social media. But in their certifications, in their police training, nobody is training them except now they're being trained, okay? So in 2021, the Secret Service, United States Secret Service, did a threat assessment survey. And what they found was that over the last 20 years, 75% of the school shooters posted what they wanted to do before they did it. They posted it. What's the problem? School officials did not know what to do with the information or what information to ask for. Law enforcement was not trained enough to handle what goes on here, and none of them knew about something called the Electronics Communications Privacy Act. What the ECPA says is that, yes, it's a federal statute. Internet companies, you have all this great information. Law enforcement, if you want this information, these are the things you have to do. So I created a class identifying and intercepting the school shooter through leakage. Leakage is what they post on social media before they did it. You look at Sandy Hook, you look at Cruz and Parkland, you look at Highland Park, you look at Michigan. There were all tall tale signs on them wanting to do this. So here's my class in a nutshell. I want school officials and I want law enforcement there in the first day of class. And I show them what's possible. And here's a real problem. There are 30,000 school resource officers in our country. 30,000. but only 5,000 of them are certified to be there. So 2 years ago, I wrote the Illinois SRO training requirement. If you have an SRO in your school, they must be trained, either by NASRO or ILETSB, trained so they know, because we go to a triad. In this training, they will learn that they are mentors, teachers, and law enforcement. Those are the 3 roles that they play in the school. And the least thing they want to do is arrest and give tickets, but they want to mentor young kids, okay? So the problem was when I trained SROs and they came to my class, I used to have 30 of them, I asked them, how many of you are certified juvenile officers? They all raised their hand. How many of you belong to the Illinois School Resource Officer Association? Half raised their hand. How many of you belong to NASRO and have NASRO certification? They'll look at each other and they're like, what's NASRO? That's like being a doctor and not knowing what the AMA is. That is your governing body, and they didn't know what it was. This is a problem.
How can parents communicate with their own school districts? You know, I don't think anybody thinks about what's in place until after a massacre happens.
Yes.
And then it clearly wasn't enough.
Yes, so what we do is I want schools and law enforcement together. What the schools should ask the parents, and if they see something, say something, is a big campaign of mine. And then what happens is law enforcement gives that information to, schools give that information to law enforcement. Law enforcement then does something called a preservation letter to the social network. And that holds the information for 90 days. And under ECPA, when death or great bodily harm is about to be committed or is being committed now, they can do something called an exigent circumstance. This is paperwork, or actually it's a portal now, that law enforcement signs into. They upload the image or the screens capture that they got from the school, and they can get the information on who posted it within hours. And then what you get is an IP, an Internet Protocol number. You run the IP, comes back from Comcast, Cox, Charter, whatever. You do a second exigent circumstance to that. Within 4 hours, you're going to know who made that posting. Once you know who did it, now this class is all about getting that child the mental health help they need. It's not about arresting a child. That may happen, but it's about getting them the mental health they need before they do the shooting. So once they get the information, there's 3 search warrants law enforcement must do. They have to do a search warrant on the house for weapons, on their social media for intent and planning, and on their cell phones to see who they're communicating about the threat if anybody's happening to them. Once you go into those 3 things, either by consent or by search warrant, you will know that kid's deepest, darkest secrets, and you will know if they are a threat or not. And this is how we can stop school shootings. At least 75% of the time, we can stop it. But our school officials and this row, Regional Office of Education, in 39, they are all about it. So much so that we're training all the administrative staff and all local law enforcement in this protocol.
One last question. This doesn't get covered in the news, but in inner cities across the United States of America, in our community, 14-year-old kid gunned down. 90% of this stuff is Facebook beefs and social media stuff. Not hardcore criminals, not all gang members, you know, and I don't know, the kids may not have the support at home to do some of the things you're talking about, right. But I also think a 14-year-old doesn't get shot in the head because he planned to,
right.
You know, and
Absolutely.
There's a lot of dangers outside of those systems, schools, homes, where people get into it, and social media can be so deadly, and we see it right here in our own community.
Absolutely, and again, it goes back to training law enforcement. So I have law enforcement agencies who I'm bringing, you know, false personations of fake accounts being made on some kid, and they're not taking it seriously. Now, you don't know if it's another kid who did it. You don't know if it's the kid's dad, a kid's uncle, creating this to talk to her friends. We have to be on it. We can't just let it go, because if you don't investigate this now, it's going to rear its ugly head later. Same thing in the city. I just had a conversation yesterday with a detective. He was a detective. He was high-ranking Chicago commander who created something called SOMEX, social media exploitation. They disbanded a unit. So nobody's doing social media exploitation in the city of Chicago?
I think if you just looked at the raw numbers of kids killed in mass shootings in schools versus kids mowed down in the streets because of retaliation over
Absolutely.
this, the number would surprise most
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely.
All right, same question. 3 things, you sit down in front of a parent right now. What's the 3 best pieces of advice you can give them for their kids and keeping these bad actors out of their lives?
You are responsible for your children. You are not only responsible for their food, clothing, shelter, and education, you are responsible for their technology. The second thing, there is no such thing as privacy for your child. You are responsible for them. You need to be in that device by monitoring. And the third biggest thing is that keep those devices out of their rooms at night. That's how you're going to keep your kids safe.
Detective?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.